Hey everyone, Dr. Kuniak with a video lecture. What I wanted to go over was the article proposal assignment and the draft article proposal assignment. I've had some questions on that, and I wanted to just kind of address it all. So, you're for the article proposal assignment to start with the bigger one and then work backwards. You're going to submit an introduction, a literature review, and a conclusion section. So that mirrors the article proposals that you might use in other areas. So, like if you're submitting to a professional conference, it doesn't always look the same, but they're going to want kind of an introduction and a review of the literature and what your goals for the presentation, that sort of thing. If you're submitting for um, an IRB application, they're going to want to know some of those higher tier, like purpose of the study, literature review backing, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, some methods. If you're submitting for a grant for travel funds or something like that, they're going to want to know the purpose of the study, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and some more practical aspects of the study to relate to the funding aspects. If you go on into your PhD programs and you want to complete a dissertation, or it's a part of it to complete a dissertation, nobody wants to complete one, you will have to do a dissertation proposal summary. So it's something that comes up enough that this assignment becomes kind of a practical assignment to get you starting to think about that. You're supposed to draw upon some of the literature around the topics that you're working on. You're not then going to give me an introduction, a lit review, and a conclusion related to each of the articles. You are giving me one introduction, lit review, and conclusions related to the study that you would like to accomplish. And so to do this, what you're going to do is so if you think about it, if you're searching for a study, you're going to read the abstract first. And that is a very, very high tier look down on the study that gives you kind of a brief introduction, a brief purpose, maybe a little bit about the method, some conclusions, about a paragraph, a long paragraph in some cases, but a paragraph. So that if I'm thumbing through research articles and the keywords pop up to your study, I can look at that and say, like, okay, it's worth looking a little bit more into. That might be one that I want to include. The introduction should lay everything out for what to expect from this study, what its purpose and goals are, and why that's relevant. If you look, some of the sample articles that are out there um, don't, um, they may not let you see the whole article, but they'll typically let you see some of the introduction of the article, and that's really why it's giving you just enough to let you see if this is an article that you want or not. um, when you're writing the proposal, when you're writing the introduction, you're going to give me um, why you believe this study should be done and talk about some of the themes associated with the elements of what you're looking at. So like if we look at, there have been so many studies done on like music and mental health, for example. You might talk about like mental health globally, like why mental health treatment is important. Then you might talk about adjunct treatments that help with mental health treatment. Then you might talk about one of those is music and talk about music for a bit, and then get into the purpose of the study is to do blah, 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 blah. That's an introduction. So paragraph for each, not meant to be super long, maybe a couple pages. That should then lead into the literature review. You will cite literature in the introduction, but the literature review is a more exhaustive look at all of the literature we know on these topics. And you're telling me a story. So don't just go article to article through this. Do it just like I described the introduction. Share the themes in an order that makes sense to tell the story that should get me, the reader, to understand, like, okay, this all makes absolute sense as to how all of these things are connected and why this person is thinking that this study ought to be done, and it's supported by all of this literature that backs it. Meant to be a bit bulkier. And then the conclusions for you is a little bit different than the conclusions would typically be. Like if you did a traditional study, conclusions comes at the end, not typically a part of the proposal. Usually you would end with like the proposed methodology. In this case, you're going to end with a conclusion section, which in a traditional article is kind of a re-review of the results and why that's relevant to the field and where we should go now from that. It's not supposed to be left up to um, the reader should not be left wondering, okay, so why? What was the purpose of all of this? What do I do with it now? The conclusion section is typically where you provide all of that to them and say, like, based on everything that I learned, these are my recommendations for where we go from here. So your conclusion section in your article proposal is going to be more about, based on what I learned from all of the literature that I pulled together, I believe that these are the directions that we would need to head if we did this as an actual study. So that being said, all of those sections, the draft is just if you made an outline of all of that, like a traditional outline with, like, title, header, A, point B, point C, point D that you're covering, and you wrote then like a sentence or two in each of those areas to show me why you believe that you're on track or what you're intending to highlight in those areas, and then a brief review of some of the literature that you've pulled for yourself, and then the conclusion can be very minimal in the draft. It can just be some sentences as to like where your head's at with where you would go with this. That is enough for the draft. The draft exists as an assignment to make sure that you don't go the entire semester researching all of this and not doing it correctly in some sort of a way and end up wasting a lot of time by the end. The draft should give me enough of an idea that you're on track. That's the purpose of the assignment. um, Nothing more than that. Just that I can read it and be able to say, like, okay, that's not a good fit, or okay, this is great. Just keep going on, um, before you waste a lot of time. Let me really quickly show you some pieces to an article that I just had published. I decided to use my own article because I own the rights to it, so I'm not picking apart somebody else's. But you should be able to see this now. So there's my abstract, one long paragraph that explains the whole rest of the study out. The introduction, I talk about video games and the video gaming community here in one paragraph. I talk about original sort of concepts that have come up through the mental health literature. I start leading into why it's important that mental health professionals should be looking at this stuff differently now. And I start talking about personality traits and coping strategies, which are some of my variables. I lead into a longer discussion about coping, personality, coping, and resiliency. And then we get down to here where I have the purpose of the study, and that's my introduction. Like in a fully published article, the introduction is only about 2 pages to give you kind of an idea. Then I get into the overview of theory and literature. This is a literature review. It's broken apart just like the introduction is, but with more information in each section. So now 2 lengthy paragraphs explaining out everything that I feel like is relevant about the gaming community, just like was the first paragraph in the introduction. Here is a, you know, 3 lengthy paragraphs about all of the information that I believe is relevant about previous studies that have been done on this community. Here is an even lengthier section, well, about the same length, 3 or 4 paragraphs about gamer personality, why we need to be paying attention to this as mental health professionals, a couple paragraphs about coping strategies, a couple paragraphs about resiliency. And you see I'm citing the entire way along. I'm not just giving you a feel for the what the authors said in these cases. I am making the statements and then I'm backing them with the information that the authors shared in their studies. So I'm making claims throughout all of this. And then because it's a traditional study, we get into the methods. Here you would get into your conclusions. Hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully that answers a lot of questions broadly for everyone. Let me know if you have specific questions and we will go from there. Thanks and talk to you soon.